Welcome to Memento Argentum. In this instance, Memento Liber, where we review books. This time, it's 1:35 a.m. from the Fazbear Frights series for FNAF, Five Nights at Freddy's. 1:35 a.m. is my least favorite book out of this entire series. There's no reason for this book to be the way it is. At all. I don't know why this book is like this. I don't like it. Frankly, I think that it's horrifically mistoned. For both of the previous reviews, I had tried to focus on the fact that it was young adult angled. My issue with this book is that it seems to have forgotten its young adult. For one of the stories in particular. It also has my least favorite story I've ever read, or that I've read from this series so far, and I seriously doubt it's going to get usurped from any of the future stories. This one is going to stay bottom of the pile no matter what, for the foreseeable future. That's how disgusted I was by this story. So, the three stories in 1:35 a.m. are 1:35 a.m., Room for One More, and The New Kid. 1:35 a.m. is about this lady named Delilah, who is a divorcee. She got divorced, a horrible divorce. It wasn't just amicable divorce. It was horrible divorce that shattered everything she had going for her in terms of feeling like a person. She's in a terrible position. She can't even live in the real world anymore. She loves sleeping so much that it's difficult for her to remember why she needs to get up in the morning. So that story, she keeps having problems with her alarm clocks not going off properly, or her possibly sleeping through them, who knows. So she's comes across this garage sale one day, and she finds a doll. It's named Ella, and it claims that it can work as an alarm clock, so she picks it up. My biggest issue with this story isn't just that it is genuinely bad. It is. 1:35 a.m. is one of the worst stories out of this series. It's near the bottom. It's not the very bottom, because that honor goes to one of the other two stories in this book. But this one is second to last, because Ella doesn't work as an alarm clock. She doesn't know why, but she wakes up to her boss calling her, trying to figure out where she is. So she chucks Ella into the bin immediately. She immediately goes, no, screw you, you're going in the dumpster immediately. My problem with this story is it portrays Delilah, who is the main character. I'm sorry if I didn't say her name, but this book is not a good book, and it's frustrating on levels that I was not expecting out of a young adult book. Delilah is the main character. She goes through a messy divorce. She finds Ella, who looks exactly like a baby that she wanted to have. She then chucks the doll into the bin when it doesn't work, regrets that later only because she feels like she maybe shouldn't have been so hasty, maybe. But she starts seeing Ella around at 1:35 a.m., not p.m. like she had thought she had set her for. So she had messed up. It was her fault that Ella hadn't gone off. My issue with this story isn't just the fact that it's supposedly young adult, but our main character is a divorcee. What teenager or preteen wants to read about someone who is divorced, in a messy divorce too? A fully adult woman who is considering having children. That story has no reason to be in this book. This book is portrayed as young adult. Young adults rarely want to read about divorcees. I have serious issues with that being included in this book. On top of that, because the issues are compounded in this story, Delilah seems to be having a nervous breakdown, and no one around her even remotely suggests that she try and seek help for her. She loses her job because of her coming on nervous breakdown, where she thinks she sees Ella around 1:35 a.m. every single day. There is absolutely no proof that she sees Ella. No one else sees her. It looks like it is all in her head, and no one is suggesting she goes and sees someone. She gets fired from her job because of it. She tries to stay at her best friend's house. Her best friend doesn't even remotely suggest she go see someone, which means she is the worst friend in this entire series. If you look at everyone else, the way that they react, she is the worst best friend. Second place goes to the main character of one of the other two stories in this book. And the only reason they're second place is because she is a worse best friend because she doesn't realize she's a terrible best friend. That makes it worse. I have serious issues with this story being in here because I don't know why they would try and play psychosomatic. Like, oh, it could be all in your head. Okay, great. What was the point in this? We got to watch someone devolve into madness from their perspective. It wasn't fun. I realize I'm overly emotional about this, but it's really frustrating, especially with the first two books being as solid as they are. It makes no sense for the first story of this book to be so mind-bogglingly wrong. It doesn't fit with the theme of Five Nights at Freddy's. Some people may make an argument that she was actually being haunted by Ella. There is no proof of that. From my perspective, she was imagining Ella every single night, or she was being haunted by her. One of the two. Either way, she should have tried to see someone about this, and she didn't. And no one suggested it in her life, even though she was apparently a decent enough worker that they were trying to help her out through getting over this messy divorce. So I just ranted for about 5 minutes, and I apologize for that, because that was extreme. That was a bad start to this book. I already felt off kilter because she was a divorcee, and I was like, okay, something's off with this. I didn't realize what was wrong with that until a friend of mine went, why do they have someone who's a divorcee in a young adult to preteen book? Like, there's no way you can argue that this is an adult book. This is clearly marketed towards children, towards preteens, towards teens. Why would you have someone who's a divorcee as one of the main characters, and it's an 86-page book, or story? That is a long story. And she's a lead. Okay, moving on to the next one, because let's reach a little bit of a high point. Room for One More is the next story. Main character's name is Stanley. He's at a dead-end job working at a factory that is clearly a Fazbear. It's clearly a part of the Five Nights at Freddy's world. It's clearly from Fazbear. I'm guessing it's sister location. I'm trying not to do any theorizing. I leave that up to Matt, Pat, and the game theories, and the game theorists. But he's clearly working at a location similar to Sister Location, which is the 5th video game. He's the night guard, of course. And he just broke up with his girlfriend. The story is 54 pages long, and frankly, it's the best one out of this book. And the premise is, one night he falls asleep because he's a terrible night guard, and he can't keep his eyes open because I think he suffers from narcolepsy. That's just my opinion. That's a really bad joke. I apologize. But he falls asleep, he wakes up, and there's this, like, wooden marionette doll thing with a tutu, and anyone who's familiar with Five Nights at Freddy's knows that those are called mini-renas. And he sees one on his desk, and it talks to him, and he decides to talk to it because he broke up with his girlfriend, so he just wants to have a conversation with somebody that is mildly, like, positive. He's just trying to be positive about something. And the mini-rena's like, we like you. Take us home with you. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that, darling. Like, a little weird that you're saying we, because there's only one of you, but I'm sorry, I can't take you home with me. And so he falls asleep again after talking to the doll, and when he wakes up, the doll is gone. And then he notices that one of his limbs is swelling, oddly, and his throat hurts bad. So, Stanley, a lot of adults who read a lot of horror will be able to pick up on exactly what just happened. And each night he sees the mini Rena on his desk, and he has a conversation with it, and he keeps telling it, just stay on my desk and I'll take you home with me. Like, but it doesn't. It disappears. And his limbs start swelling, and he's having trouble, like, moving his arms. He's having trouble moving his legs. He does end up going to a doctor at the behest of his sister. Wow. Hey, look. In the same book, they show a better example. Sorry. Gonna let that go. But you can see it's a slow descent into he's just gonna die. Like, there's no hope for him the second he starts screwing up. And you can tell the moment he starts screwing up, like, it's clear. That one is my favorite out of this book. Room for One More is the best story. Not for lore reasons, but based off of a readership. Being a reader, not focusing on the theory, just being a reader, Room for One More is the best story out of this group. Partially because, even though he is an adult who just broke up with his girlfriend and is having adult problems in this book that is for preteens and teens who should not give a care, his story is the most sympathetic out of the trio. He is the one where I was like, I just wish you weren't so anti-doctor. Because he does have a semi-good reason for not wanting to go to the hospital. His dad was misdiagnosed, and it caused his death. Like, there was no chance for him when he got misdiagnosed. So I kind of understand that, and that's where it kind of works. But I'm an adult reading this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's pretty decent. I don't know how I'd feel if I was a preteen or teen reading this. I'd probably be like, wow, this is really boring. When does he die? Like, I know that sounds really terrible, but they're not doing any favors here. The first two stories are fully adult characters. These are the first two adult main characters that we've had for this entire series. And they're both in the same book. The other books had teenagers. Don't get me wrong, Alec was a teenager. I think he was 16 or 17. Like, there are teenagers in this series, but not adults with jobs, 9-to-5 jobs. Like, I don't understand this. Go back to the drawing board, please, Scott Cawthon, please. I seriously doubt you're going to see this. But this is unacceptable for preteen to teen. This is not an acceptable thing to have in your book series. And then we get to my least favorite story. Let me take a minute. This feels like a rage review, and I apologize for that, but this book seriously was so frustrating because of the first two books. It'd be one thing if all three of them had weird inconsistencies. This was the first one with major inconsistencies, things that made me go, why? Fetch kind of had a little bit of that in the first story, which is why it's my least favorite out of that group, because Fetch had a little bit of quantum theory things, which I'm hoping is brought back in later on in the book series. Okay, back to 1:35 a.m. The third story is called The New Kid. Main character's name is Devin. It switches between him and his best friend, Mick, and the new kid, Kelsey, who seems like a nice guy. I'm not quite sure why they chose to name him Kelsey, because I've never met a male Kelsey. It's entirely possible that it is a male name, but I've told a couple of people the synopses for these books, and every single time I'm like, yeah, Kelsey's the new kid, he's really cool. It like stutters them when they hear that Kelsey is a male name. So first off, that's kind of weird. Second off, Devin is a sociopath, if not psychopath, and I know that they're basically the same thing, but I'm pretty sure he's a psychopath. And I hated reading from his perspective. So when it demanded that I feel sympathy for him, I couldn't. There is a scene that results in him going, no, I didn't mean to do that. Please believe me, I didn't mean to do that. And then you see it from his perspective after the fact, and you hear that, yes, he truly didn't mean for that to happen. but you can't believe him because of everything that's happened. This is the longest short story for this entire series. It is 90 pages long. And we spend most of it in Devon's head, who is a psychopath, who hates everyone, including his best friend, who is stupidly loyal to him. Mick is an amazing character, and when we read from him, like, when you read from his perspective, he is like joy. I enjoyed listening to Mick's voice. Devon deserved what he got. But what makes it worse, rather than ending it on what happened to Devon, this is the reason that this story will never be trumped for worst story, by the way. Like, I could almost forgive having a detestable main character and him just treating his best friend like crap. But this is what devolves it into a worse story. Not only do you get to see what happens to Devon and how he's going to basically starve to death. Yeah, that's the end of the character. I'm going to spoil that right here. Devon starves to death with a broken arm, or he bleeds out, either one. It's not really choosy. He's definitely going to lose a lot of blood what happened to him. I'm not going to tell you what happened to him, but if you start reading the story, you'll probably pick up on it. What makes it worse is another spoiler. I'm going to have to spoil another thing. Devon causes Kelsey's death in the story, and that is what he claims he didn't intend to do. And because of what led up to it, I didn't buy that. I did not believe that he did not intend for Kelsey to die. And then I read it from his perspective, and he's going, I didn't intend this. Oh my God, what do I do? And he's feeling guilt-ridden about it, and I'm just like, I still don't believe you. You killed a bird in cold blood. You have shown very antagonistic traits towards Kelsey because he's popular. But I'm supposed to believe you didn't intend to have him end up badly injured, at least? Really? Okay. So Kelsey's dead. And that's what results in Devon's eventual death as well. I'm going to leave that vague, though, just in case someone actually wants to read this tripe. So, the end... What is it? Page? Is it a page or a page and a half? It's the last half of the last page. The last half of the last page has Kelsey going to a new school. The last half of the last page introduces the idea that Kelsey actually isn't dead. This is a short story. This is not a long-running story that's going to continue after the fact. Unless they pick it up in book like 6. Because I seriously doubt it's going to happen in Bunny Call. And it didn't happen in Step Closer, which is book 4. So unless they pick it back up in book 6, this is not the correct way to end a short story. I would not have put it at the bottom, even with as bad as Devon was, if it had ended a half a page earlier. That half a page made it drop like a rock in water. This is not a good book. Completionists, go ahead and read it. There's a chance that I just am super biased and there's a reason that I didn't like it. Like, maybe I just didn't connect with any of the characters, and fair play. I didn't connect with any of the characters except maybe Stanley. That's the only one I felt sympathy for. Delilah is dead. Devon is dead. Mick is a good friend. He's the only good character in that story, because I don't know what's going on with Kelsey now. This book, the only reason to own this book is to complete your collection. Unless you can find value in it that I didn't. I grant you this is a very biased review. Let me give you a rundown on the rating. 1:35 a.m. is bottom. The book is the worst overall because none of the stories were good. They were just okay at maximum. First place is still going to Lonely Freddy, obviously. Next is Count the Ways. Next is To Be Beautiful. Then it's Room for One More, because I did actually genuinely enjoy that one a lot more than the other two. And especially compared to those two, I'm sure if it was in a different book it would be lower, just because of how unbelievable some of those aspects are. But because it's in that book, it's at number, what is that, 5? The next one is Out of Stock, which is from Fetch. The one after that is Into the Pit. The one after that is Fetch. And then at the very bottom, it's 1:35 a.m. and The New Kid. Both of those are at the bottom, and I seriously doubt they're going to get dethroned. Because, no. That was unacceptable. I know I got pretty angry in this review. I do apologize for that. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me hate this book, because this is going to be my longest review. I do apologize again for it, but it's just, this is not what should be going into a young adult book. Those characters, and the fact that there's no acknowledgement of how terrible they are, like, that's my biggest issue with Mick in The New Kid, is the fact that he doesn't acknowledge that Devin actually is kind of a terrible person. He's just like, it's Devin. And Delilah never gets called out on possibly having a nervous breakdown, which literally could have stopped her from dying. Like, that's the most frustrating part of that. So, like, this book is the worst. It is. I don't think... I'm hoping that it never gets dethroned, because I don't want it to, because that would indicate that I'm probably not going to finish the series. If there is a worse book coming, I'm going to stop reading, and that's going to be sad, because I enjoyed some of the stories. Lonely Freddy is still an amazing story. Count the Ways. I know that's not a good story, but I enjoyed it, and that's the point. I found enjoyment in a story that I know has major flaws. The fact that I couldn't find that in 1:35 a.m. or The New Kid indicates something, at least for me. So, if you enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing. If you want to join my Patreon, show me some love, that'd be awesome. If not, don't worry about it, I understand. Please join me next time, tomorrow, when I review Step Closer, which is the 4th book in Fazbear Fright. I will admit that I won't be doing any more of these reviews until the next book comes out, which is in September. So I just wanted to get these all caught up and ready to go. If someone wants to suggest that I do review the original trilogy that Scott released, Silver Eyes, Twisted Ones, and Fourth Closet, I am more than happy to review those, but it would be nice if I had more than a few subscribers. I'm also, as much as I hated on 1:35 a.m., I am willing to read them aloud, read the stories aloud, if you guys want me to. I will try and keep my comments to a minimum if I do the readings. So please join me tomorrow for a Step Closer. Until then, adieu.